Welcome to Yell, Fight, Sooie, college football from three friendly-ish rivals.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the March 3rd, March edition.
We can't get too excited about it being March because then Jimmy Kimmel will make fun of us.
It's Yell Fight Sooie, though. That's where we are.
Right.
With me today is James Christopher. Absent today is Scott McIntyre. We were going to do a clip show of Scott's highlights, but that would have been a 15-second show.
Yeah, I mean that guy's really if I were to describe him, he's really a series of medium lights, right? Like he's not really low lights and he's not really highlights, just sort of meh lights. So
I think when the kids created the word mid, that may be what they were talking about.
I do think it's a picture of Scott in a Cardinals jersey and those pink plaid shorts he has. I don't know. There you go.
And somehow I'm glad you said the pink shorts because I was picturing him in board shorts carrying a fruity drink.
Yeah. The only thing cool about that is the fruity drink, and I'll die on that hill.
So, we're in this kind of weird college zone. There's a whole lot to talk about, but nothing's really pressing. We're not quite at March Madness yet. We're still a couple of weeks away from, or I guess 10 days away now from selection. All three of our teams should be making the NCAA tournament. I know you guys lost a heartbreaker to TCU this week to prevent you from winning the conference. For 15 years running or something. I saw that on Twitter. Some of your fans are not happy with the current situation. We're kind of in the opposite place where we're going to finish in a solid second. Similar to you, we're going to finish in second in our conference, but we're pretty happy about it considering where we started with losses to Wofford and Murray State in December.
And forgetting your jerseys.
But to come back and win 14 conference games and with a chance to win a 15th this Saturday against number 2 or 3 Alabama, whatever they're ranked right now, not a bad spot. And then Arkansas has played through some injuries, and I think will be a solid competitor in both the SEC tournament and the NCAAs. We'll just have to see what happens with them. We don't have to pay a lot of attention to Arkansas this week. I'm just doing it as a courtesy to Scott because I'm not feeling great.
Now it's beginning. Now, welcome to the new show. Y'all fight.
Silly.
Y'all fight bacon, I guess.
Whatever. So that's our basketball update because we're not a basketball show.
No.
Other things going on right now, the NFL Combine. So, one of the goals when you're recruiting a guy, as you know, I'm sure this is part of Sark's pitch as well, we're going to put you in the NFL.
Yeah.
This is the next step for that group of guys. And these are the guys. Texas has 5 players, running backs, Roschon Johnson and Bijan Robinson. Of course, Bijan is the more talented of the two, but I think Roschon has a real chance to catch on with a team and be a solid contributor, have a solid NFL career.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun for him because he came to QT as a quarterback and did the position change, and having lived through Tyrone Swoops, the tight end, I didn't know how that would go necessarily, but he bought into it, and obviously, clearly, is going to probably play in the NFL. So, what a really cool story for him.
It's always interesting too when people talk about a solid NFL career. The average NFL career is something like under 3 years.
Yeah, particularly for a running back.
Yeah, so a solid career, if you made it 5 years, I don't even think that gets you to the pension, but if you made it 5 years, that's a pretty big deal. And I think that is a player fulfilling their promise for the most part because it's such a big grind, especially as you say for running back. You also have a couple of D linemen, Keandre Coburn and Moro Ojomo.
Mm-hmm.
And then the linebacker, DeMar Vion, over the guy with the sweatbands.
The guy with the sweatband. Yeah, and I'm it's funny because one of the things we talked about the show all the time, right, is lines, offensive lines, defensive lines. And the Longhorns really had a lot of offensive linemen drafted since, 05. And of course they still won't probably this year. But it's at least nice to see some defensive players and some defensive linemen getting some actual NFL consideration. I think it shows some improvement at that side of the ball, particularly as we get ready to move into the SEC where they actually play defense.
Yeah, and I will say, Coburn and Ojomo are both players the A&M were on deep into the process, and Texas won those head-to-heads. So those are players that I'm glad to see them, I'm getting old now that I'm following recruiting, because when I was in college, it's like, hey, new guy showed up. Cool.
Yeah. Right.
But now I spend a lot of my time being happy or sad based on the whims of 17 and 18-year-olds.
Which when you were younger, you did too, but that was
a completely different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So the combine's interesting too, because these guys who got invited, and I'll talk about A&M's real quick. But these guys that got invited are considered to be people who are likely to be drafted. But as we've seen year after year, you can certainly play yourself up into a better position. You can test well, or you can fall completely on your face and run the risk of not getting drafted at all. So for a couple of these guys, maybe that's going to be a reality. I think you're going to break your first round draft string, because I know it's been a minute since you had a first round draft.
And I think Bijan will break the string. I mean, there's been talk that he might go to like the Texans at 12 or something.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. On the A&M side, we've got Devon Achane, running back, who should be all of our players should be somewhere in the top 3 rounds. And because they're skill set players or skill position players, it kind of just depends on team needs and how many other safeties and DBs are coming out. And testing is going to be a big deal. Safety Antonio Johnson and Jalen Jones. And if I have to guess, Antonio Johnson is probably a first round draft pick as a safety, because he's kind of an all world kind of guy. Achane will be somewhere in the 2nd round, and Jalen Jones probably in the 3rd round. But depending on different scouts, it could go, all of them could elevate or decrease based on what happens over the next month and a half.
What I think helps too, oh my God, the name slips me, who you think's going to the 1st round. Watching him, he plays versatile defense, and I think, as we've seen what the Cowboys have done, it's almost like football's following baseball in the sense of, if you can play multiple positions and line up in different places on the field, you become infinitely more valuable. And I think that's going to help him get drafted in the 1st round.
Yeah, and it's the NFL's changed certainly since we were in college, but running backs aren't sure things to get picked in the 1st round anymore. Matter of fact, it's pretty rare. So, and I don't disagree with you. I think Bijan's got a great chance of being picked in the 1st round, but that's not considered a premium position by the NFL anymore.
Well, it's not to 31 other teams. Jerry Jones will still give an Emmitt Smith-like contract to a guy who's broken, and then wonder why, sorry, this is not an NFL show or my therapy session. So
Zeke's a great guy in the clubhouse, and that's important too.
His coach's kid, I think.
Sure, like a coach on the field, I heard. Real gym rat.
Right.
Arkansas, since they're part of the show, sometimes when Scott bothers to show up, they've got 2 wide receivers, Jaden Hasselwood and Matt Landers, that were invited to the combine, 2 offensive linemen, Rick Stromberg and Dalton Wagner. And I think probably the cream of their crop, who was a transfer from Alabama and played 1 year at Arkansas and is now entering the draft, Drew Sanders. And that's probably your 1st rounder out of those 5 guys, although I'm sure Scott would tell us why all of them are potential 1st rounders. I will say that it's interesting, neither of our teams have offensive linemen that were invited to the combine. He's got 2. And I think a lot of their success has been holding on and keeping offensive linemen into their 4th and 5th years and not watching them walk after 3 or transfer, as the case is now. So I think that's been a lot of their success over the last couple seasons, is guys like Stromberg and Wagner being the big bodies who not only are big bodies but are experienced, because on the offensive line, that matters.
I have a question for you about that then. Like I've talked about how Texas has really not been super great on the offensive line for now going on 20 years. What I've seen people talk about is like the proliferation of 7-on-7 in the state and the lack of focus at the high school level on offensive lines. You think that's actually it, or do you think that this is just something that's happening and Texas is missing on recruiting?
I think a lot of your recruiting is righted itself, because I think Sark has a better concept of what he needs to actually field a competitive team than previous coaches did. And without throwing a lot of guys under stones who may or may not be doing Red Bull and vodka at this moment, certain of your other coaches, their programs seem to be, I'm going to get a lot of 5-star DBs, 5-star wide receivers, and get those skill positions so my recruiting rankings look good.
Sure.
It wasn't about building a team necessarily. And so you see that in offensive lines take years to build. And so you see that kind of gap. I think some of it, I think there are fewer offensive linemen in Texas, but that other teams are able to put it together. So if you look at a school like Baylor, who we both dislike strongly, they seem to be able to put together competent offensive lines. You look at Texas Tech, seems to be able to put together offensive lines. TCU made it to the national championship by being able to put together an offensive line through scraps. So I think some of it's, maybe there aren't as many players, but I think a lot of it is not having the right guys developing those players and getting them into a base unit. I think your offensive line coaches in general are woefully underrated for the actual contribution they make to the team. Like a running backs coach, run the ball. All right, if a guy comes, you stop them. That's the running back coaching. Don't drop.
Somebody comes with you, move.
Yeah, but your running backs coach is typically your best recruiter, so there's some trade-off in coaching skill versus that aspect. The offensive line coach is the one that is all about technique, all about getting you motivated, and all about knowing the 5 best guys to play together. Not necessarily the 5 best guys, but the 5 best guys playing together at once to provide a blocking scheme that you need to be successful. And so I think it comes down to coaching, because there certainly have been players. Because at the same time, A&M has been able to pull, and we, in general, recruit from the same pools, right?
Yeah.
So we've been able to pull offensive linemen and put them in the NFL.
I would just go to Wisconsin for all my offensive linemen and been like, you look like you need a lot of biscuits.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be Nebraska that used to be that way.
Yeah, corn fed.
Of course, they also used to have counties put up scholarships, so they didn't, have to waste scholarship on linemen. But that's a whole different thing.
Let me compliment you on something real quick that has nothing to do with this show, but I got a better look at your framed Astros headlines.
Mm-hmm.
Did not notice you did. I thought it was, looking at my phone, I thought it was 2 frames. I like that it's 1. That's pretty cool setup. And I like that our friend Ashland, the Braves fan, just liked your picture. So there you go.
Well, anything Ashland likes, I'm super proud of.
Yeah.
Not that she will ever listen to the show because we're not talking about Auburn.
We're not.
Yeah, we talked about that offline. There's a third one of those covers that the Chronicle did that I don't like because it said something about the tainted title in 2017. So I elected not to put that in a frame.
Good.
Anyway, back to the show.
Back to the actual.
Scott, what do you have to say about that? Great.
Somehow I'm expecting you still to meander through an answer. Okay.
In other fun news, because we've got about 15 minutes left or so, this weekend we both got to go to our first baseball game of the season. I invited my friend Jim the Longhorn, who was completely incognito, to a baseball game at Bluebell Park, Olsen Field at Bluebell Park, which we actually won, which was a big deal for this weekend since we decided to go on a little 3-game slag before A&M took out all their frustrations on the Fighting Lance Berkmans on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
23-0 in 7 innings.
That'll do it.
So all the
offense. By all means, let's move Lance to Texas to be the head coach.
All the offense we couldn't muster against the mighty Portland Pilots. Houston Christian had to feel the wrath of that. So, but that was your first time at Bluebell Park. So I wanted to kind of get your impressions and, how did it go other than getting to spend time with me, which is awesome.
Well, that's always the best part. Well, no, first of all, the ballpark I thought was beautiful. I'm a very romantic person when it comes to ballparks. And so when you walk in and you get whatever the feel is, whether you're going for something that's very classic, like what I think Bluebell's going for, or something that's pretty modern, I can get pretty wrapped up in the experience just based on my first impression of it. And I thought it was a beautiful ballpark. It was cool because we were there when they were celebrating the core. So even it being sort of a Sunday at 1:00 game, and the game not going particularly well for the majority of the game, I thought the energy was just really good, really fun. I thought it was my big takeaway was an educated baseball crowd, which you as well know, you know as well as I do, that's not always the case.
Right.
But it felt like it was, again, an educated baseball crowd. I thought that the sort of in-game stuff for audience participation at first, and like I was like, okay, cool, we're going to see the rifleman thing again, and then I think by the end I was doing that thing too. So
Sure.
clearly, indoctrination works, I guess. I still feel bad, and I'll tell the story of, I didn't know when the school song would come on and the whole like saw them off thing. And one, I'm not a super big touchy feely with people I don't know person.
I mean,
I'm
you're not Howie
also,
Mandel level.
I'm, no, but I'm also, I don't know that I would have done the whole saw them off anyway, but I felt bad because I was wearing a maroon jersey to fit in, and this really old guy wanted me to be part of it, or he wanted to like, I get it, wanted to feel some level of connection, and I just kind of blew him off, and I felt bad since the second that happened, that I could have, for 30 seconds bitten the bullet and given that guy, what he was maybe looking for in that moment. So I kind of feel like I was a shitty person, but other than that, I had just a really great time, and it was as good an environment as I was hoping for.
Well, I can tell you that guy probably thought about it for about the 5 seconds that not interaction happened, and then moved on with his life. So you're probably in the clear on
I
that.
hope so.
The other good thing for you, we were sitting in section 204, and so those of you who are listening who have been to Bluebell Park, Jim did not get to experience the full show that is section 203 because they sat the core guys in 203 this time and moved general admission to 204. And so the Raggies, the literally section 203 has their own Twitter account.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but they were in 204, so a lot of the chanting, the things that got started, you were a section removed from, so it makes it a little bit more enjoyable because when you're right next to it, if you're not into it,
yeah,
it can wear on you.
Yeah, I can see that. But still, I overall, it was a really just really great experience, and I'm incredibly, first of all, thank you for bringing me out there, and just again, I would definitely go back.
And to say nothing bad about Dish Falk, we do at least have grass.
Yeah,
I mean, makes a big deal when you're playing baseball.
No, it's a big deal. Now that we're here, let's talk about the turf at Dish Falk, because they didn't even. I can almost handle turf with dirt cutouts like what we grew up with.
Yep.
The Astrodome. Or if you're gonna do the turf around the bases, at least try to make it match the color of the dirt on the mound. I would have been disappointed if A&M had turf, because that's, the agriculture is part of your
it's in the name. Yeah.
But I also feel like, and I from what I understand, Chris Del Conte is trying to move both of the fields to a natural surface eventually. So hopefully we'll get back to it. But I hate looking at the turf field at Dish Falk.
Well, I know
Dish Falk's kind of a dump compared to Bluebell, honestly.
Well, I mean, I know that part of and you guys will face the same things we're facing when you enter SEC play. The Big 12 is a great baseball conference, and I'm not disparaging that at all, but you have programs in the SEC from top to bottom that rival AAA teams as far as amenities, as far as talent, as far as level of play. And it bothers me as an Aggie to go to Bluebell and see our 6,100 seat stadium, knowing that if I go to Starkville, Mississippi, a state that is 50th in education and income, and they've got, I think, a stadium that seats 15,000 people. Now, granted, there's less to do in Starkville, but that's the kind of, they have a program that they're really proud of. The community's into it. It's easy to get tickets. It's kind of a challenge to get a ticket to Bluebell Park because of the limited seating, and there's a years long wait to get season tickets. Those seats that we had that were good seats, even with the chairbacks, I think are $20 a game. That's not a big investment compared to a major league stadium. But to get in line, you have to be a donor that makes a fairly substantial contribution and wait for a decade maybe before you can actually get season tickets. And then let's say nothing of the first level, that gets even worse.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was expanded to 8 or 10, I don't need 15, but 10,000 people, you could certainly support that and make it more of an event for the students, have more engagements that way. And I think Dish Falk even with its great legacy and history, and I know the level of fans that you guys bring to big games because I've been there. Only seats, what did we determine? Little under 8,000?
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So I would assume the extra money you're going to get from the TV package moving to the new thing, hopefully is going to start going to some facilities like that, because I think there's no reason a program, we can rag all day and go back and forth and fight about Texas's football prowess and whether they're a blue blood or not. Texas is 100% a blue blood when it comes to college baseball. I don't think anybody with half a brain would ever argue that. It is not a fake accomplishment to be the team that has been to Omaha the most in its history. And you guys can be struggling like you were a couple of years ago and turn it on at any moment with recruiting, and the next year be in the Final Four in the College World Series. And that's the level of program you have. I know personally we like David Pierce probably more than your fan base does right now.
Yeah, it was funny because we did the whole we were watching each other's Twitter accounts as both teams struggled on Sunday, and just able to predict the complaints of David Pierce's game management. Yeah, I guess he didn't call the don't throw the home run pitch. They're like, whoa, boy, it was.
Well, interestingly enough, I was at a friend's house watching that game, LSU versus Texas, Tuesday night, which was a great baseball game for both parties up until the ninth inning.
Yeah.
When Texas gave up a 3-run bomb to the number one team in college baseball right now. I don't think there's any shame in that. I think it was a good game. There was no hanging your head. I think, again, people who were overreacting to that are your football fans who figured out baseball comes on every now and then and watch it.
Right.
I will say I was there with a priest who happened to be at that house, who had married David Pierce's son to his now wife, and has David Pierce's phone number in his cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
So he is the priest is an LSU fan, and we had to stop him from texting Coach Pierce during the game. And we're like, hysterical. I don't think he carries his phone, so I don't know what you're trying to do. But it just goes to show you that the LSU mentality permeates everything that they do, even with priests. I'm gonna rub that in your face. Shut up.
Baseball be like that sometimes, David. But yeah, I mean, look, I think I still think A&M will be better than what the record is now. I think both teams will be what we thought they were going to be at the end of the year, and I think Texas is going to take some time to find its offense. And I think when you lose Ivan Melendez and you lose players like that, it takes some time to replace them. I think they're going to pitch well enough to keep them in just about every game, and we'll see what they're like at the end of the year. I still think that they're going to definitely make the postseason. I don't know that they'll necessarily make Omaha this year, but I still think it'll be a season worth watching.
But that's the thing about baseball. It's certainly true in the major leagues, as we talk about on our other show, that every major league team is going to go through a period where they just don't hit, they just don't win games for whatever reason, and it might last a week or a couple of weeks, and if they're a bad team, longer than that.
Yeah.
In college baseball, it's certainly a shorter window because you don't play 162 games, but you are going to have a bad weekend. You are going to have a weekend where things just don't work out, and when you are a high profile program like Texas A&M, like Arkansas, anybody you lose to in that kind of weekend is going to be in general a team that is inferior to you from a talent standpoint.
Yeah.
Baseball, that doesn't really matter. It matters on the long haul. I think the difference in college baseball is you might be allowed to have 2 of those weekends in the entire season versus a month.
You could have a month, yeah. You could have
a month where you're playing 500 ball and whatever, and then you turn it on. We've seen it in recent World Series history. We've seen it throughout the history of baseball. College baseball is a little bit different, but the people who freak out over losing a Tuesday night game to Lamar or Texas State don't understand the level of talent that are at those schools in Texas. Yeah. So it's interesting, but I think it's a learning process for a lot of people.
I think it is, and I think it's in part too awkward because so many people started watching college baseball for the first time in the last year or two, born out of frustration with the product the MLB is putting on or not putting on the field, depending on what year we're talking about. So we'll have to deal with, I think, a lot of that, a lot more. But I do think, again, I think both programs are headed in the right direction. I don't know what Arkansas looks like, but
Arkansas is very, very good. They're a top 10 team, and they're going to be a top 10 team provided they stay healthy all year. I know they lost a frontline starter before the season started for the season with Tommy John surgery. And I'm sure Scott will be happy to talk about that at length the next time he's going to make it on the show. But they are a loaded team. Interestingly enough, I've got a person I went to high school with. Their son is a freshman pitcher for Arkansas. So I will be closetly rooting for them when they're not playing A&M this year.
yeah. Well, good for him too. I mean, and I anybody that can handle both college and playing a sport deserves my respect, because it's a tough life being a college athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think many people understand it, but that's a topic for another show.
It is, yeah.
I think we're going to leave that here today. Happy to be back with the folks here on Yell Fight Sooie. Happy to get more consistent in our shows, and we'll be back next week with probably March Madness talk, and
Yeah.
we'll check out completely for about 15 minutes during that show.
Hey, all I know is we don't have a wife beater as the head coach anymore. So there you go.
Hey, we'll let you know where Texas is playing.
Just let me know when I have to watch. Other than that, I'm going to be watching spring training baseball. But
right.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, leaving it there. That's James Christopher. I'm Andy Tomchesson. Thanks for tuning in to Go Fight Sooie. Scott, get well soon, please. We have 50
back because Andy, the name of the show is Yell Fight Sooie. You said Go Fight Sooie.
Exactly. I'm off my game because there's no Scott. Yeah. We're ending on time because Scott's not here.
Yeah. Did you ever thought that Scott would be the glue that held this thing together? I didn't.
So. Scott would be 20 more minutes of content right now.
He would be. Scott, we miss you. All right. We'll see you next week.
Bye.